I'm got late. Welcome to Modesto. This is chapter 17, April 2003. In April 13th, around 4:15 p.m., Cerrito residents Michael Luby and Nicole Ballinger were walking their dog beneath a cloudy, threatening sky. They had strolled about a quarter mile off a popular bike path near Richmond Inner Harbor on the northern shore of the San Francisco Bay. It was low tide, and their dog stopped in a grassy area amidst the marshland and began sniffing something furiously. When Lobby walked over to investigate, he discovered what looked like to be a decomposing body of a baby. Lobby and Ballinger hurried to a nearby housing development, where they asked a resident, Keith Woodall, to call the police. The Richmond Fire and Police Departments wasted no time responding. Lying among the leaves and the other debris near a rocky area called the Breakers, they found the fetus. It was lying on its back with its head tilted upwards. Although all four limbs were attached, the right arm was almost severed. At 4:53, the town's fire captain, Eric Newman, officially recorded that the infant was dead. None of the investigators at the scene were able to determine the fetus's gender or race. Its genitals were not intact, and its intestines were exposed. A piece of nylon twine was entangled in the remains and appeared to be looped and tied or tangled around the neck. Coroner's investigator Chris Martinez, a deputy with the Contra Costa Sheriff's Office, took several photographs of the scene and the fetus and then gently wrapped it in a towel and placed it in double plastic bags for transport to the Contra Costa Coroner's Office. The police ruled it as an unexplained death. The preliminary police report stated that the infant, which weighed 3.5 pounds, was full term and appeared to be only a few days old. It was ashen gray and appeared to be essentially disemboweled. There was no obvious cause of death, as the external trauma had most likely occurred post-mortem. In the wake of the discovery, a missing persons telepath was sent out to agencies across California. At 8 o'clock the following morning, a clerk with the Modesto Police Department notified Detective Grogan about the gruesome discovery. The Richmond Police Department was investigating. Although he was due in court to testify in a kidnapping case, Grogan immediately called the Contra Costa County Detective, David Villalobos, leaving him a voicemail before he turned off his cell phone and entered the courtroom. During the lunch recess, Grogan received a call about another body. This time it was an adult female just found off Point Isabel in Richmond. Contacting Lieutenant Pete Small and the East Bay Regional Park Police, Grogan learned that the park visitors had reported finding the remains shortly before noon. The responding officers had located the body of a woman washed ashore directly east of the Brooks Island, the very spot where Scott Peterson said he was fishing on Christmas Eve. This time, it was the adult female just found off Point Isabel in Richmond. Contacting Lieutenant Pete Small with the East Bay Regional Park Police, Grogan learned that the park visitors had reported finding the remains shortly before noon. The responding officers had located the body of a woman washing ashore directly east of Brooks Island, the very spot where Scott Peterson said he was fishing on Christmas Eve. Lying prone on the rocks, the body was clad in a bra and what appeared to be the remnants of pants. The park police had not located a skull, and both legs were missing below the knee. Smalley knew about the fetus that had been recovered from the same general vicinity. The recent stormy weather must have moved the bodies ashore, he thought. Small suggested that the Modesto police hasten to the scene. The press was already arriving, and more important, it was still low tide. Soon the body would have moved and any evidence might be washed away. Grogan instructed Small to photograph, videotape, and recover the body as soon as possible, whether Modesto police had arrived or not. He also requested that no details about the clothing or condition of the body be released. Sergeant Carter and Detective Hendy and Owen helicoptered to the Point Isabel Park. As they landed, the officers could see reporters already camped out in the parking lot just east of the shoreline. From that vantage point, it was possible to see the body, which was concealed beneath a yellow tarp, but 2 news helicopters had already taken footage, and one of the choppers was still circling. Sergeant Dave Dubois of the Park Police greeted the Modesto investigators and led them to the coordinated site. This area of the beach was frequented by joggers and dog walkers, he told them. Given the traffic, he didn't believe the body had been there long. The badly decomposed body, had no head, hands, or feet. There was nothing below the right knee, and only the tibia and fibula bones remained beneath the left. A good portion of the woman's buttocks, hips, and lower abdomen were intact, but they had undergone extensive decomposition. The rib cage and part of the spine were exposed, and the stomach and most internal organs appeared to be missing. While the officers would have to wait for DNA testing before a positive ID could be made, there was something very telling in the evidence that was still clinging to the body. The bra that had been fastened around the woman's chest was virtually intact and bore a Bali label. Her pants were so decomposed that most of the fabric were mere fuzz, but the waistband revealed a motherhood maternity label, and the color of the trousers, as off-white or cream, could still be determined. The last article was a pair of jockey brand underwear, also severely degraded. One other item that was carefully retrieved was a strap of gray duct tape, about 12 to 14 inches long, that had been affixed vertically down the front of the woman's pants. Police on the scene interviewed A. Gonzalez, the woman who had reported to finding the body. Around 11:45 a.m., I was walking down the shoreline, and I had just kept looking over at the rocks, watching some dogs, and I was curious what they were looking at, and I looked, and it was a body, face down, and I saw the body, and I went to call the authorities. When asked how she knew it was a body, she admitted that the decomposition had made it difficult. What she saw had been the shape of a body, but it looked like somebody that had been wrapped up like a mummy. Gonzalez, who had a bachelor's degree in gerontology, was studying to be a physical therapist. Having taken a number of anatomy and physiology courses, she said, she had worked with a lot of cadavers. Gonzalez also said that the body had been pretty tangled in the rocks and that she hadn't seen a head. The body was half in the water and half out from the lower thighs down. She couldn't see the legs. Gonzalez reported that there were a few additional people walking around, including one other woman who had spotted the body but had already left the scene. The interviewing officer asked if there was anything else she knew. Gonzalez said, after the body gets investigated, they have to know that there were dogs eating it. The officer repeated, there were some dogs eating it? Yes, she confirmed. So all the markings aren't going to be true to the crime scene. Okay, can you say how many dogs there were? Gonzalez said that there was definitely one big black dog that had been spotted near the body. It left a while ago. I think the owner was concerned about it getting sick. Dodge Hendy reboarded the helicopter and took digital videotape and photographs of the recovery sites for both bodies. He also recorded their relationship to Brooks Island and the Berkeley Marina. Officers from the Contra Costa coroner's office rolled the female body into the sheet and placed it inside of a body bag. Police then ordered that the cadaver dogs be brought to the scene to search for additional body parts. Brian Peterson of the Contra Costa Coroner's Facility, no relation to Scott Peterson, performed the autopsy on the fetus, now referred to as Baby Doe. He determined that this was a full-term male infant in the advanced stages of decomposition. The skin was discolored but well preserved. He estimated the gestational age of the fetus at between 33 and 38 weeks. Dr. Peterson was unable to determine whether the umbilical cord, only half a centimeter long and ragged on one end, had been tied or if it had simply detached in the water. The decomposition also prevented him from concluding whether the fetus had actually gone through the birthing process. He did, however, find evidence of meconium in the body, indicating that the baby had most likely not been born alive. Meconium is a substance that accumulates in a fetus's lower intestine in utero. In 95% of live births, a baby expels the meconium within 24 hours after he or she is born. The fact that meconium was protruding from baby Doe's anus indicated that he was born alive. He probably did not survive for more than 24 hours. Dr. Peterson found no deformities or abnormalities that could have prevented the baby from surviving outside of the womb if properly cared for. The lungs were found to be small and wet, and Dr. Peterson could not say whether the baby had ever taken a breath. The stomach was empty and there was no animal or fish activity. This was quite unusual given the advanced stages of decomposition, suggesting that the baby had been in utero until very recently. The body's condition also made it impossible to use its weight to reach an accurate estimate about age. Yet the height indicated that the child was close to full term. An estimated gestational age of 9 months was based on the crown heel length, although it could have been a large 7.5 month infant, since such measurements standard are merely averages. Whether Connor was born alive became a critical issue at trial. Defense counsel Mark Geragos would tell the jury in his opening statement that Connor was carried almost to full term and was born alive. Since his client had been under police scrutiny from the moment Lacey was reported missing, there was no way that Scott could have removed and later disposed of Connor's body. Someone else must have been responsible. The debate over Connor's life would become critical in the battle for Scott's as well. None of the coroner's observations eliminated the possibility that this was Scott and Lacey Peterson's child. The coroner noted that a piece of fiberglass tape was loosely wrapped around the fetus's neck and left the shoulder when the body was recovered. The tape appeared to be knotted at the point of the shoulder. Speculation would abound as to whether the loop and knot were man-made or simply the result of churning waters entangling the body in floating debris. There was only a 2-centimeter gap between the material and the neck, which meant that the circumference of the loop was smaller than the baby's head. This could support the notion that the noose was affixated by someone after the baby was born, but the prosecution experts had other theories. The baby's brain was liquefied, allowing for the possibility that the loop could have slipped over the collapsed head. Furthermore, if the tape had been tied around the neck, the state would argue that there should have been some residual mark on the skin at the throat. There was none. The coroner ruled that the autopsy could not reveal a cause of death. Detective Grogan was left with the grim task of informing Lacey's family of the discoveries. On the afternoon of Monday, April 14, Grogan left messages for Sharon Rocha, Ron Gratzky, and Brent Rocha requesting that they contact him. About 4 o'clock, he spoke to Sharon Rocha, informing her that the bodies of an adult female and an infant had been recovered from the San Francisco Bay. They had not yet been identified, but he promised to keep her updated. A little later, he relayed the same messages to Lacey's brother. Around 10 o'clock that evening, Grogan contacted the family again to prepare them for the breaking news report that the female's body had no head, hands, or legs. Both Sharon and Brett asked Grogan where Scott was. He did not know. Sharon told Grogan that she had left a message for Scott the previous day, but her call went unreturned. She then checked with Jackie Peterson, who had been trying to reach him since the previous evening and was beginning to worry. Sharon told Jackie that she thought that Scott might want to be with his family because of the news of the bodies. The press reports alone, however, weren't enough to convince Jackie that these were the bodies of Lacey and Connor. She told Sharon about another female body, similarly mutilated, that had washed up in January. That same evening, an autopsy was performed on Jane Doe. It was in an advanced state of decomposition, missing not only its head and a portion of its lower legs, but all the internal organs from the abdominal cavity except the uterus. Since no evidence of tool marks was found at the bone joints of the missing appendages, the medical examiner performed the autopsy concluded that either someone with great surgical skill had removed them, or the victim had been weighted in those areas, and then the water's currents and decomposition had caused all of those limbs to fall apart at the joints. The bones bore no signs of injury that had occurred before death, such as resorption lines, callus formation, or rounding of fracture margins. However, Dr. Peterson found that the woman's 5th, 6th, and 9th limbs were broken. The fracturing appeared to have occurred shortly before her death. Jane Doe's missing limbs suggested that the body had been in the water a long time. The corpse also shows signs of extensive fish activity. In foraging on human remains, fish start by eating exposed areas of soft tissues that are unprotected by clothing. Once the exterior flesh has been eaten away, they will swim up the sleeves through other gaps in clothing, and often find their way into the chest cavity and consume the internal organs. In a subsequent review of the autopsy at my request, San Antonio's chief coroner, Dr. Vincent Diamao, Diamao, confirmed the Contra Costa coroner's finding and theorized that the fractures were most likely sustained around the time that the woman had died. It appeared that they were the result of one violent blow, such as a kick, to the left side of the rib cage. The injuries could have been the result of a similar violence to a body shortly after death, but simply dropping the body in transit would not have likely resulted in such breaks. While the body could have been identified as Lacey Peterson by the tattoo on her left ankle, a missing ovary removed when she was a child, or an abdominal scar from the surgery, the state of decomposition eliminated these possibilities. Dental records were useless because the head was absent. The body did have an enlarged uterus, which signaled her pregnancy, but there was no physical evidence of vaginal delivery. The fact that the woman had been wearing underpants supported this theory, he noted. The cervix and area below the belly button were intact. There were no signs of a man-made incision to remove a baby. Yet a tear in the body's abdominal wall was large enough to permit a fetus to exit the womb through it, as interior pressure from bacteria and gas built up inside the mother, a sad phenomenon known as a coffin birth. In his confidential report, Dr. Peterson noted that the condition of the female's body was consistent with an exposure of 3 to 6 months in a marine environment. There were barnacles adhering to the exposed skeleton. Some of the deep muscle tissue was still red, indicating that decomposition had not progressed completely through the remains. The cold temperature of the San Francisco Bay had slowed the decomposition process. A toxicology examination of the woman's tissue revealed no illicit drugs or poison, only elevated levels of caffeine and PEA, a product of decomposition. As with Baby Doe, the autopsy alone could not determine the cause of death. A large plastic bag bearing the logo of a company called Target Products Ltd. also washed up in the area where the two bodies came ashore. It had a piece of silver duct tape wrapped around it. The police recovered a bag and used the internet to identify Target Products as a Canadian company. The owner said that the bag sounded like what they used to cover pallets of their product, concrete grout used in bridge construction. They were currently shipping material to the San Francisco Bay area for projects, including the Richmond Bridge. After the bodies were found, the detectives also began recovering flyers that had been posted by Scott Peterson. They wanted to know if he had used the duct tape to affix them, if the brand matched the strip on the woman's body, and if the adhesive on the tape could be linked to a substance on the hairs found on Scott's boat. At 5:50 that evening, police received a call from a woman reporting a suspicious incident. While she and her husband were dining at a restaurant called Skates over the weekend, a couple noticed something unusual in the bay through the restaurant window. It looked like a dark brown or black hair bobbing up and down in the waves, about 150 feet away from the water's edge. She said that the hair did not appear to be attached to a person, which was the reason why she didn't report it. It wasn't until hearing the news that the police had recovered a headless body at Point Isabel, about 3 miles north of the restaurant, that she realized that the incident might be significant. Christine Crawford and her certified cadaver dog, Dakota, arrived at the scene at 6:30 in the evening. Dakota, a 6-year-old pit bull terrier, was a seasoned investigator who had taken part in 60 searches since being certified. A second dog, Merlin, and her handler, Eloise Anderson, were also called in on the search of southern portion of the beach. When Dakota and Christine Crawford started traveling north along the shoreline, Dakota hit on a piece of fabric tightly wedged between two boulders. In almost the same area, she showed an interest in the breeze, which was blowing onto the shore in an easterly direction. Dakota walked into the water, but was forced to stop when it reached her shoulders. Investigators flagged the spot for future reference. As they were wrapping up in the search, an unidentified woman told the officers that she had spotted a tarp in another area of the beach. However, follow-up using the cadaver dogs indicated no ties to the body. The police also found pieces of duct tape stuck to some of the rocks in the area, and one of the officers located a dense metal rod that was wrapped in duct tape. Although the rod broke into pieces when he attempted to dislodge it from the rocks, he kept it in evidence. As Grogan was overseeing police activity on the shoreline, Detective Brocchini was searching for Scott. Hold on. All right. Intermission. So, we are actually on Covina Avenue. This is the park that Lacey visited all the time with Mackenzie. It's no longer open to the public. Okay. Let me get situated. As Grogan was overseeing police activity on the shoreline, Detective Brocchini was searching for Scott. It was likely that he had quit driving his white 2002 Dodge Dakota truck and GPS tracking system because he suspected that he was being followed. Scott had apparently traded vehicles with his brother John. Agents were watching his parents' house, his father's business, and an address in San Diego where the Dodge truck was parked. At one point in the evening, Lee and Jackie Peterson left their residence in Jackie's 1998 Jaguar. Scott was not with them. On Wednesday, April 16, around 9 a.m., Brocchini finally located Scott through the wiretaps on his cell phone. Peterson was checking his voicemail from 3449 La Cresta Avenue in San Diego. Surveillance units were immediately dispatched to the location, which was a house belonging to his sister, Ann Bird, Ann Bird's adoptive parents. Scott was staying there with Ann's permission and using their Lexus instead of his Mercedes-Benz. 45 minutes later, Brocchini got word that Scott was walking around the neighborhood. An agent reported that his appearance had changed considerably since she had seen him in February 2003. He had grown a thick goatee, he had bleached his hair, eyebrows, his beard was blonde with an orange tint. The female agent noticed that he appeared to be walking in the surrounding areas through an alley with no apparent place to go. About 11 o'clock, the agent called back and reported that Scott knew that he was being watched. At one point, he disappeared into an alley. She pulled away from the curb in an attempt to locate him. She saw him at the corner watching her. As she drove by, he smiled at her and shook his head. He also went up to a surveillance vehicle, asking the driver, "What agency are you with? Are you state or local?" He was obviously riding down the vehicle license plate numbers as well. Eventually, Scott returned to the residence, but the agents discontinued their surveillance around 5:30 when they realized he had slipped away again, this time possibly by motorcycle. Meanwhile, police learned that unusable DNA samples had been extracted from the bone and tissue recovered from both bodies, and results could be expected the following day. Based on that information, Detective Grogan was finally able to obtain an arrest warrant for Scott Peterson. Now, all he needed was his suspect. During my interview with Ann Bird, she revealed that she was the one who alerted Scott to the discovery of the bodies. She was en route to Round Table Pizza Parlor in San Pablo with her children, with her husband Tim, and had called the news. Ann immediately dialed Scott to see if he knew. When she told him that the body of a woman had showed up, he reacted coolly. "They'll find it's not Lacey and keep looking," she said. Later, when she told him about the baby, though, he grew angry. Oh, here we are. This is 523 Covina. Sorry. We're just walking around. Ann immediately dialed to see if Scott knew. When she told him that the body of a woman had washed ashore, he reacted coolly. "They'll find it's not Lacey's and keep going," she said. Later, when she told him about the baby, he grew angry. "How could anyone do this?" he asked. Later, when prosecutors asked Ann to characterize Scott's reaction, did his anger seem to come from pain? Frustration, pure rage, she responded without hesitation that his anger seemed to be a result of being discovered. Interestingly, Scott had stayed with Ann for about 10 days. Oh, hold on. Look at that beautiful sunset. Hey, Lacey. Hey, Connor. Sorry. Interestingly, Scott had stayed with Ann for about 10 days before the bodies washed up. She was also supplying him with a key to her parents' home in San Diego and to their 3-story cabin in Lake Arrowhead. Ann found out about Scott was using both places regularly without asking. Sometimes he'd let her know where he was by speaking in code. "I'm at Uncle Jim's cabin," he would say, or "It's busy," meaning someone else was there with him. Unbeknownst to the media, prosecutors intended to call Ann to testify, among other things, about Scott's visits and his revelation that he had borrowed a shovel from the captain that he had never returned. He never explained to Ann why he needed the shovel, but she knows that he would also have access to a secret room in the basement of the Lake Arrowhead house where the hidden door set flush with a wall led to a storage space in a woodpile. Ann, who alerted Scott to the room when he needed to build a fire in the cabin, told me that she never looked in the secret space after Scott stayed there, but thought it was a good spot to bury something like jewelry. During our interview, Ann also detailed her brother's stay with her family. When he first arrived, she was convinced of his innocence and was angry with the police and Sharon Rocha for insinuating otherwise. She told me he started out as a great house guest. One night, Scott insisted on making homemade spaghetti sauce after she pulled out a canned version. "Why are you using that?" he said. "I know how to make homemade sauce. It's easy. You just have to crush tomatoes." With that, he grabbed the car keys and headed to the store for fresh ingredients. Though Ann was pleased at his helpfulness, she was also curious about his high spirits during such a tragic time. Her story recalled Scott's odd behavior on Christmas Day when he had invited his neighbor Karen Severus to dinner, offering to prepare her a separate meal of tortellini less than 24 hours after Lacey had gone missing. During the visit, however, Ann grew increasingly uncomfortable with her brother's behavior and began keeping notes. While searching for Lacey, Ann and 2 male friends took Scott to a local bar called the Ballast Pub. When one of the men asked Scott if he killed his wife, he responded, "No, I love my wife," speaking of Lacey in past tense. When Ann and Scott paired up for a game of pool, she said he remembered him getting angry when they lost the game. Later that night, after speaking with Scott at their house, one of Anne's friends decided that he was guilty. Scott had made a big fuss over one of the men's cars, a Ferrari, and was drinking heavily. Mixed drinks, wine, and a fancy concoction in a martini glass. Another time, Anne and Scott were at a local yacht club. Anne's mother was babysitting and had insisted that she be home at 9:30 p.m. She kept trying to get Scott to leave, but he ignored her pleas and continued to order drinks. He's being totally inconsiderate, she recalled. All those subtle signs of trouble were eclipsed, however, when those bodies washed up close to her boat, to her Berkeley home. Okay, bye.